What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher. And that was Hank Williams bringing us in on request by David. In this episode, David is going to talk about on-farm hog processing. Ryan is going to talk about the word butcher. And I'll be bouncing around putting in my 2 cents when I see fit. Enjoy the show.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
This week I wanted to talk at everybody a little bit, kind of regarding the place in the year we are, some thoughts I've had. You know, we're breezing through summer right now, and fall's almost almost here, I suppose. Hasn't felt much like summer here in Michigan. I don't know if anybody out there can sympathize, but we've had floods and we've had, 90-degree weather since the beginning of June, and it's been a drought, then a flood, then a drought, then a flood, and it just really hasn't felt like any season in particular here. So everyone's kind of looking forward to fall, I think. We on the farm certainly are. And I guess when fall comes around, you start to think about how you be planning your work for the following year. And even though it's a little bit early, it's hard not to kind of imagine these things. So I've been thinking about livestock and how to expand that program here on the farm. And I've kind of been leaning towards experimenting within my rights without the USDA, without inspections, talking about direct-to-consumer sale, which I mentioned on the podcast before. Retail exempt, custom exempt. Coincidentally, I was talking to my grandma, who I affectionately refer to as Bama ever since I was, a year and a half old or whatever. I was telling Bama about we were discussing my unique career path. I think when we talked about that, kind of brought some memories back, and because her father and my great uncle, my Uncle Dwayne, had a meat cutting shop in the back of their farm. And, and by shop, I mean, there was a wooden block, probably, and a grinder. She said there was a grinder and no refrigeration or anything. Probably a hose and a couple buckets. And they'd cut meat for people. So they'd either raise animals and then slaughter them and cut them up for people, or they'd kill other people's animals and cut them. Process game, a lot of that in the fall, and apparently they also did kind of a hog share, which I think was very common then. So either all the neighbors buy into a bunch of hogs that somebody's going to raise, whether was my grandpa or another neighbor, and then when fall time came and slaughter time came, they'd all get together, get the hogs in one place. One person would host, supply the equipment, and then everybody would work together to slaughter and cut these animals as quickly as possible. But they made an event of it. There was a big meal. There was some socializing. It was kind of a couple-day process because they let the hogs hang, and they made sausage in the meantime and got some things on cure and got some things on brine, and kind of made me curious. And I was wondering, why is this something that doesn't happen quite as much anymore? I have a friend who raises sheep about 40 minutes from me here in Michigan, and he has a lot of people come with various religious beliefs, and they have to kill their own animal and have a specific process, and he hosts them, and they come out. But it's more of a business, it's not a community activity, and so I've been kind of thinking about hosting one of these here at the farm, and I'm not sure if we'd raise the hogs. I have another friend that raises great hogs about an hour from here. The guy that I work with at the slaughterhouse, his name's Chris, and he's got a family farm and raises excellent pork. Then maybe when fall time came, everybody come over here and we'd hold one of these big events. We'd all get together. We'd have multiple stations, multiple people on each one, with the thought that many hands make light work, and we just go for it and then have a huge meal the next day and maybe a breakfast the next day. Thinking about this, it made me remember a story in a book that I had read. There's this book by a woman named Edna Lewis, and she was a country chef that kind of has a bit of fame and over the years. She wrote a book called A Taste of Country Cooking, and this book is divided by the seasons, and then in addition to a seasonal division, a 4-section book, it's also divided up by memorable events throughout the year. So you have things like a late spring dinner. You've got a busy Harvest Day summer breakfast, Emancipation Day lunch. You've got a morning after hog butchering breakfast, and that was what made me think of this. And I just kind of wanted to read a little passage because she can probably illustrate this process a lot better than I could. And then I'll tell you about my first hog killing, which is, kind of similar. The intent was different, but it was somewhat similar. So she writes, hog killing was one of the special events of the year and generally took place in December, the exact time depending on a solid cold spell coinciding with the right time of the moon, which was when the moon was on the increase. The cold spell was essential, as the hogs could not be carved up until they were thoroughly chilled, and the meat had firmed up enough to cut properly. This took a good 3 days of hanging in the open air. Aside from the special feeding, fattening, and cleaning of the hogs that led up to the day of butchering, there were many other preparations to be made. Scaffolds for hanging the hogs had to be erected, wood laid for the fires that would heat the iron drums of water needed for scalding and cleansing the hogs after they were killed. Many families had an outdoor or summer kitchen, an extra kitchen detached from the house, which was used during the hot weather so that the continuous heat coming from a wood stove wouldn't make the house completely and unbearably hot. These summer kitchens were also useful at hog killing time, as there was too much fat to be rendered, sausage meat to be ground, and other cooking to handle easily in the main house, so they'd all be scrubbed and put in order ahead of time. The butchering day was a hectic one. Every family had a dozen or more hogs and were all joined in helping one another. After each hog was killed, it was carefully scalded so the bristles would scrape off easily, leaving a smooth, unmarked skin. After this was done, the hind legs were fastened together by a special stock called a gambrel, which was shaped like a rolling pin with pointed ends. The stick was placed between the legs, and the pointed ends were inserted under the hocks. To hang the hog, which would be about 6 feet long, 2 men would hoist it up, hooking the hind legs over the top of the scaffold. The hog was then cut down the center. A large round tub was placed underneath for the entrails to fall into. My father would remove the liver and the bladder, which he would present to us. We'd blow the bladders up with straws cut from reeds and hang them in the house to dry. By Christmas, they would turn into transparent, like beautiful balloons. We always handled them with care and made them part of our Christmas decorations. The following morning, my brothers and sisters and I would rush out before breakfast to see the hogs hanging from the scaffolds like giant statues. The hogs looked awesome. They were glistening white inside, with their lining of fat, and their skin was almost translucent after scraping. We waited with impatient excitement through the 3 days of hanging. We were all looking forward to the many delicious dishes that would be made after the hogs were cut up. Fresh sausage, liver pudding, and the sweet, delicate taste of fresh pork and bacon. One of my favorite foods we always had after the hog killing was crackling bread. When the lard was rendered and strained, little defatted pieces were left, which were called cracklins. Cut into small pieces and mixed into cornmeal batter, they made a bread which was deliciously crispy and chewy. Meanwhile, we enjoyed the fresh liver, which my mother would pan fry for breakfast or dinner. When the 3-day period of hanging ended, the hogs were carved up. The special skill that was needed for butchering was provided by an itinerant hog killer, who would always appear a few days before the first cold spell that we waited for so eagerly, and who would often stay on for 3 or 4 weeks past hog killing. It wasn't unusual for someone to arrive for a few days' visit during the winter months to stay on for several weeks, or sometimes all the way until spring. As soon as the hogs were butchered, a series of necessary activities ensued that kept the whole community busy for at least a week. Besides all the special treats we'd be enjoying at mealtime, it was a highly festive feeling of everyone working together that made this one of our favorite times of the year. The first part of the hog to be removed was the layer of white fat that seemed to glisten when the hogs were hanging. This fat is known as leaf lard because it peels off in thin sheets or leaves. It's very special, and its taste and texture is so fine we always used it for pies, biscuits, and even cakes. A group of the women that would be on hand to cut the lard into small cubes as soon as it was removed and then render it in heavy iron pots. Sometimes the pots would be hung over an outdoor fire. The fat had to cook very slowly in order to turn into liquid. Then it was strained and poured into 5-gallon tins. After it cooled, it was sealed and stored in a cool, dry place. Each piece of meat had to be carved to a certain shape, and as it was cut, trimmings flowed from the ham, shoulders, and bacon. They turned into a great pile, and huge pots were needed to render this fat, which would be used for frying meats and other food that didn't require the same fineness of flavor that the pastry does. It took 3 or 4 days of constant work to render all that lard, but when it was finished, there'd be a good year's supply for every family. Among the trimmings, there was always some lean as well as fat. This had to be carefully cut away. The lean from the trimmings was put into the sausage bin, along with what we now call loin. I think that was why the sausage was so good, because it had in it the pieces from all parts of the hog. Lard and sausage meat are still being prepared in the same way in this part of Virginia. Once the lard was rendered, the women would turn to making sausage. First, our meat was seasoned with sage, black pepper, and salt. Then it was ground in a sausage mill and made up into cakes and canned in jars or stuffed into casings that came from hogs' intestines and smoked. When all of the sausage had been cooked and sealed into jars, a piece of the jowl was cooked with the liver and then finely ground and seasoned with sage and onion. The jowl is mostly fat and makes the liver softer and lighter. We called this delicate pate liver pudding, and it was a favorite dish of everyone. Some of the jowls were cured with the hams and bacon. They were delicious sliced and oven-fried for breakfast as a change from the bacon. As an aside, this is David speaking now, not Edna Lewis. Jowl bacon is not overrated, and it's fucking delicious. While the women were busy with rendering the fat and cooking the sausage and liver, the men would prepare the hams, bacon, and shoulders. These would be seasoned with salt, black pepper, saltpeter, and brown sugar and stored in a wooden meat box for about 6 weeks. The meat would then be cleaned with a stiff brush and hung from the hooks in the smokehouse, where it would be smoked for 3 or 4 days over green hickory logs and sassafras twigs. After the meat had been smoked, it was put into clean, white bags and tied securely to make sure no flies or insects got onto the meat. It was then left to hang in the smokehouse until it was needed, which was usually late summer. Hams were sometimes left to age for a year or 2. They become quite mellow and delicious when they are left this length of time and are usually saved for special events such as family reunions and weddings. And then she goes on to give the menu of what they'd eat on a typical hog slaughtering breakfast, and, just in case you're curious, they have black raspberries and cream, eggs sunny side up, oven-cooked fresh bacon, sweet pork fried sweetbreads, country fried apples, biscuits with lard and cornbread, butter, wild strawberry preserves with wild blackberry jelly, souse, which is kind of a vinegary head cheese, and coffee. I think this sounds like a perfect morning. It kind of reminds me in a way of the first time I was on a hog kill. A friend of mine at the time had built himself a mobile slaughter unit, but was only using it in his operation. This is out on the West Coast somewhere. He had gotten it inspected, which is great. But someone asked him if he could possibly borrow it for a day, and he said, "No way am I going to let you borrow it, but I could come help you. What are you thinking about doing?" And this young guy was a chef at a pretty fancy restaurant, and they had their own farm, and they had raised a couple of hogs. These hogs were going to be for a couple of dinners that they had sold tickets to. So basically the people owned a share in the dinner, which made this process pretty legal. But come to find out later on in the story, people didn't even know that they were eating home-raised pork. So my friend agreed to, furnish the kill truck, and he kind of mentioned in passing that he was going to be doing that in about a month. And I said, man, I'd sure like to come and watch. It sounds great. And when it got closer, I didn't think I'd really have the opportunity to, because he kind of mentioned that it was going to be kind of a quiet operation, but he ended up asking me if I wanted to come. Maybe I could give a hand, and help him move a few things around. Just be an extra hand. And so I said, yeah. So I went, met him. It was probably 5 a.m., something like that. Packed up the trailer and went over to the farm, which wasn't too far away. And we pulled into the parking lot, got the trucks situated probably, I don't know, maybe 50 yards from what looked like a hog pen. Some people started showing up, and, I was kind of expecting either some farmers or like country folk. Anyways, it was kind of nice cars, and it ended up being a bunch of young guys, and the majority of them were cooks or chefs that had no experience on a kill. And the person that was conducting the kill was a chef himself, but this guy did know what he was doing, and he had a captive bolt with him. And, it was kind of an interesting scene, because instead of a bunch of burly butchers, it was a bunch of, urbanite line cooks with their knife rolls and kind of nice designer aprons. And it felt kind of strange, and I didn't really know what to expect, because I was, kind of judging it a little bit. And we started the slaughter, and the head chef of the restaurant that had raised the pigs with the farmer knocked the first animal skillfully and successfully and stuck it, and all the while explaining the entire process to everybody there. I mean, he was totally focused, concentrating, but absolutely effortless to go through this. And we hopped on the hog. They were huge hogs. They must have weighed hanging, 3 plus. I mean, not huge, but a good sized hog. And we jumped on the hog and pumped all the water out of its heart with, by pumping its arms and its foreshanks. I had only walked from the truck to the pen, so I hadn't really looked at the rest of their setup. But as soon as the hog bled out, the chef said, all right, let's drag him over. So all of us dragged this huge hog with a couple of chains over to an area near some easy ups, where kind of close by where the trailer was parked. And there was a bunch of turkey burners that had water boiling. And there was an old clawfoot tub that had 3 lengths, probably 8-foot lengths of a good 2-inch chain laying across it, perpendicular to the length of the tub. So we got that hog over, and we hoisted it up and put it in that tub, and they came over with the cauldrons of boiling water that were on the turkey burners, and we poured it into the tub over the hog. And then we started scrubbing that hog with those chains, pulling back and forth like 2 guys on a giant, like a seesaw sort of action, And we really beat a lot of that hair off it during that time. But not all of it, not nearly anything like a scalder in a slaughterhouse and we didn't have a torch. So we got that hog out, and then everybody got to shaving. And this is where I started to eat some crow for judging all these cooks, because these cooks had knife rolls with incredibly sharp, awesome steel knives, much nicer than anything you ever see in a butcher shop. And they were all totally razor sharp. And we shaved that hog the rest of the way. From there, we hung it up in the truck, and the chef had taken a couple people to go get the second hog, and I realized that nobody there knew how to gut a hog, and I never had. I gutted some other ruminants, but never a hog. But I kind of volunteered because I was feeling confident, was having a lot of fun, and I took my knife and I opened it up, and I realized that a monogastroid is completely different than a ruminant. So I had a really hard time getting my hands past all the fat, realizing where the membrane is on the inside of the cavity, getting everything out. I did bust the gut. I luckily missed the carcass, but got it all over myself. So that's why you invest in Helly Hansen or Carhartt rain pants, everybody. If you do slaughter, I know everybody wears aprons, but I swear to you, start wearing PVC rain pants. It's going to change your game altogether. It's awesome. anyways, I gutted this thing and we got it hung up and put over where we're going to do a bit of a clean down and this apple cider vinegar antibacterial intervention. And we had no way to split this hog, so we ended up splitting the first one with a handsaw. By that time, the second hog had come around. Once we got that one split and put up in the front of the truck, and the second hog was there, and we scrubbed it again, and didn't get quite as much hair off because the water wasn't quite as hot. And we ended up taking a much longer time to shave it. During this whole time, I'm meeting all these guys and meeting all these different chefs and figuring out, why they're there and what it was that drew them to it. And, surprisingly, everybody came from different backgrounds and had different thoughts on it and had different connections to these hogs. And some of them had been involved in the rearing of them and whatnot. And there's a good camaraderie about the group. It wasn't competitive the way that a lot of butcher shops were. Nobody was like trying to look the best in front of the authoritative figures. It was great. It was just some team of people hanging out, having a good time, having a chat. We got done with that hog, the second one, and hung it up. This time, my friend had gone back home and grabbed a Sawzall, so we split the second with the Sawzall. That was way better than the handsaw, I got to tell you. Got it hung up, and after we were done and had been cleaned up, I guess it was before we had the final clean down, I didn't realize it, but the chef had been setting out all this food under one of the easy ups and had prepared this, we had this spread available to us. Not only was there a spread, but the farmer that raised the hogs had brought a handle of Maker's Mark. And then there were some other beers around, and there was a huge spread of food. And I think maybe a couple people were smoking a joint or something. And it had become, we had all this fun, and I was mostly thinking about the slaughter. But for me, on a kill day, when the last animal was dead, there was still a shit ton of work to do. And then I'd hop on a bus and go back to the city. But at this time, this was like the end of a day for these guys. The cleanup was just part of it, but the main thing was over. And this was such a long process, and it was several months of hard work gone into it. And this was everybody's, kind of crowning jewel. And the chef was proud because he had something great to serve at his restaurant, and all these guys had learned something, and we were having this feast, and we were drinking this whiskey, and we were having a good time. And there was this awesome sense of camaraderie. And I've been friends with some of these guys for quite a while now, and all just from that one day, kind of sharing that experience. And the thing that really struck me about the whole thing is that, to my knowledge, the restaurant never actually advertised that they had grown that hog. So they weren't using it in that way that, a lot of restaurants will list every single farm that is on their, involved with their menu, regardless of whether or not it's a legitimate farm or if it's just an appropriately named factory farm or wholesaler of produce or some shit like that. But they just chose to put pork on the menu. They didn't sell it with the kitschy, precious bullshit of the farm to table movement, or what it can be sometimes. They just had a great clientele base that knew they were going to serve them honest, good food. And they didn't have to go through, that whole process of making themselves seem more precious than they are. They just put pork on the menu, and they cured some of it. They ended up having a prosciutto, and I think they did a Virginia ham style, and lots of curing projects, and it was a really great thing to be part of. So, anyways, it makes me think about next season, doing something like that here on the farm. Maybe having somebody raise the hogs. I don't have quite enough pasture that I'd feel super comfortable having, 2 or 3 dozen hogs. I think they really tear stuff up, and our rotation here between the sheep and the chickens and the ducks are very, very tight because of the amount of land we have. And so I'd try to find someone off-site, and then we just host the kill here. And instead of just, selling a half of a hog or a whole hog to customers and then going butchering it somewhere and then cutting it, and just selling a share where it's just kind of a nameless, faceless hog. Somebody comes and picks up a box of cuts. That's how I do. That's how we all do business, right? It's easy. But I think it might be kind of a fun experience for the people that are part of the CSA or people in the community who are looking for good pork to understand how much work actually goes into this process. For all we know, people think that robots slaughter these animals, which they do in New Zealand. Look up YouTube, robot lamb slaughter, and have your mind blown. But anyways, I think it's a great thing for the community to maybe be involved with the actual procurement of their meat.
After listening to that, if you want to do a farm slaughter like David suggested, what I would recommend is always to have a cast iron tub, put it on cinder blocks and put it over a concrete pad or dirt, then use a brush torch to heat up the water in the tub. You could usually find a cheap tub on Craigslist or on the side of the roads, or a lot of times in people's barns. And you're going to want that water to be at 60 degrees Celsius, which is 140 degrees Fahrenheit. No more, no less. I've gotten many discussions over this with some people because black pigs usually have thicker hair. People think that the hotter the water, but that usually closes the hair follicle, which makes it more difficult. I was once talking to a farmer who told me that he's done this, 20 times and you want that water hotter. And I politely told him that I've done it, at one point 260 times in a day. And he was incorrect. So you got your hot water. You're going to need to put the hog in there after you dispatch it with the 22. This next story is about how, some people don't use that. And then you're going to want it in there for no more than 4 minutes. I would start checking it. And the way you're going to know that it's done is if the toenails are easily removable with a hook or by your hand. And then a lot of people use bell scrapers for the face. You could use those. Also, a lamb skinner works great. I would make a cradle out of a couple 4x4s and just set them on the dirt. If you were going to skin it, it's always good to have a tractor with a bucket or a front loader so you can work on it. Also, it's good to use the bucket to put in the viscera so you could dump it in the field or bury it. After you remove the hog from the water, you're going to scrape it or rinse it and then scrape it, then singe it to get the hairs that are really stuck in at the root level. USDA, if this was a USDA environment, wants the hair removed at a root level. That's almost impossible at a home environment without a industrial scalder. So you're going to singe it, and then I've used everything from rocks, chore boy, to knives to then shave that remaining hair off. And most importantly, you're going to want to have a couple friends to help you. And but that's going to bring me to this next segment where I'm going to talk about the first time I did a farm hog slaughter. So enjoy. When living in Vermont, a coworker of mine named Alex, he was a Brazilian guy. English was his second language, but this guy was skillful in the art of dispatch, processing, cutting. He's probably one of the best butchers I've ever met. And I don't say that lightly. He was a fourth generation butcher. His brother was equally as good as him. And I remember one day the hide puller went down, which is a machine that you chain the back legs of the hide while they're still on their hide, and the beef is hanging by the hocks, and it rotates and rips the hide off. Actually, it's more of a peel. Anyway, he climbs on his brother's shoulders like you would if you were to chicken fight someone in a pool. And they both, with knives in tow, skinned a whole beef quicker than that hide puller. So one day, Alex asked me if I wanted to make some money over the weekend and help him do a farm processing. And I said, sure. It was all custom. And I show up. It's on a Saturday. It's early. It's about 6 a.m. in New Hampshire. It's fall. The farmer was just thinning out his herd for the winter and was going to sell these custom exempt. And what I mean custom exempt, I mean that the government isn't involved. So I'm there. I have my knives, my cup of coffee that I got from Dunkin's probably because we're on the East Coast at this point in my life. And the farmer has his animals separated. And I look over, and Alex has a tri-stone on the bed of a pickup, and he's just working it back and forth on a sticking knife. And I didn't really think anything of it. And then he asked me if I'm ready to begin, and I say yes. And then he just walks up to the first pig, lifts up its front legs, and sticks it. I had been working USDA for about a year at this point, and have only ever done things how I was trained to in a USDA environment, with the inspectors watching you and knowing humane handling and all that. So when he just stuck this animal without a knock, I reacted like, what the fuck? I was shocked. The pig continues to root. Alex just looks at me smiling because he could see how I'm reacting to this. And within about 15 seconds, the pig faints. And within a minute, the pig is bleeding out and going through its throes. At no point did the animal show distress, discomfort, or vocalization. He repeated this within about a minute to the remaining 6. I am in no way encouraging this. I'm just reporting an observation that I made on a custom kill some years ago. Alex knew the animals wouldn't react negatively because he had a razor-sharp edge on his knife. A skill set that was passed on to him by his dad, then forward by his grandfather, and generations back. Back in Brazil, Alex's parents had a butcher shop. His grandfather had that same butcher shop, and Alex left to work in a packing plant, and then eventually wound up in southern Vermont working with me. In the 2.5 years I got to work with Alex, he would bust my balls. He would go through my bone barrel and pick out bones that I already trimmed and say, what is this, a soup bone? And then compare it to something that he already did. He was a walking manifestation of the word machismo. He was cocky, he was good, and for as much shit as he gave me, he was always willing to teach. Every once in a while, I need to remind myself to look at that time in my life, to think about when I was learning the trade. I describe cutting meat as learning how to drive. When you first do it, you're awkward, you overthink, you're looking in all your mirrors, you're looking behind you, making sure your signals work and your lights work. And then you build up. You start going on the road, you start merging. Pretty soon you're driving in the fast lane, and it's just second nature. You don't have to think about any of those things. You've built up the muscle memory. You need people like Alex to work with, to push you, to embarrass you, and humble you. As good as he is, and as good as other people I have met are, there's usually always someone better. And when you meet that person who's better, how are you going to take their criticism? How are you going to take their advice? Are you going to be stubborn? Are you going to listen to them and really take note to the point they're trying to get? Regardless of the accomplishments I have made in my career, there will never be a point where I say I know it all, as much as I would like to. It'd be ignorant of me to. And any butcher and any cutter who says they know everything doesn't. Which brings me to this next piece by Ryan.
As butchers and meat industry workers, we're in a profession with many facets. We can be butchers that emphasize sausage making and added value, or butchers that dial in our meat merchandising casework to the utmost degree. Our focus can encompass a wide variety of niches, including chef butchery for restaurant applications, production butchery where one is paid by the carcass, assembly line beef boning, slaughtering jobs, and managerial decision-making jobs. So vast is the meat world that certainly the umbrella term, quote, butcher, has become a very flimsy word. It can mean many, many things. Too many. Those of us who work in these sectors come up with our own language to try to differentiate between the different types of butchers. Meat cutter, custom cutter, retail butcher, carcass butcher, cattle butcher, chef butcher, beef boner, mobile slaughterman, kill floor worker. But truly, all these terms are insufficient. The language is lacking, but even more so, the understanding of what these different niches look like is lacking. It's hard to conceptualize what these different jobs are unless one has seen or experienced them. This is an education issue. Now, the work of guys like Travis, American Butcher, has been the work of shedding light, of educating, bringing an audience into the meat industry conversation by showing what a butcher's world looks like. In an older world setting, farms were nearer to the public eye, and meat imagery wasn't as sanitized at the corner butcher shop. People saw carcasses. People saw animals being raised on farms with regularity, interacted with sawdust on the floor, butchers at work. Meat imagery wasn't shocking. It was part of life. Since the rise of the mega grocery store, society has been deprived of meat imagery. The realities of farm life and butcher life have fallen from the public eye. This certainly was intentional. Large-scale grocery models require large-scale farming and production models, and the factory butcher was kept out of view. Corporations make it their job to build a story that will be appealing to customers. The lights went out on every aspect of the meat industry, except for a very carefully manicured advertising campaign and a perfect-looking end product in the refrigerator case at the grocery store. Several decades of Americans have never seen anything but perfect pink pork chops and rosy red ground beef. If things are going to change for the better in the meat world, we have to paint a picture of what the meat world is. We have to shed light on it. By bringing in a wider audience, we can create dialogue, create clarity, and articulate a better common language surrounding concepts. This is not easy. Meat imagery is so shocking and provocative to the public. People may assume our efforts are violent or aggressive in intention. Our best efforts, I think, would be while intending to repair our community's dysfunctional relationship with their food. The more we come together and unite as meat workers, the more effective we can be. Now, what does it look like for us to come together as meat workers? Instagram's a great start. The butcher community on Instagram is generally very supportive of one another. This upliftment of each other, I think, is part of the antidote. Compare it to the disparaging of each other that is all too common. We work in an extremely competitive industry. We're pawned against one another, competing for wages, job titles, and respect. There can be a ruthless pecking order in many of our workplaces. Guys who succeed are often the most aggressive, most competitive, and most willing to step on someone else to get a leg up. We make crap wages, and our bodies hurt. Back injuries, carpal tunnel, overuse injuries are common. It's sometimes a dogfight with our brothers for better work conditions. Looking at YouTube comments is a great reminder of how much animosity meat workers can have for each other. That animosity keeps us down, though, keeps us isolated, keeps us weak. Here's a passage from the book Cannery by John Steinbeck. It has always seemed strange to me, said Doc, The things we admire in men, kindness, generosity, openness, honesty, understanding, and feeling, are the concomitants of failure in our system. And those traits we detest, sharpness, greed, acquisitiveness, meanness, egotism, and self-interest, are the traits of success. And while men admire the quality of the first, they love the produce of the second. Who wants to be good if he has to be hungry too? Said Richard Frost. Oh, it isn't a matter of hunger. It's something quite different. The sale of souls to gain the whole world is completely voluntary and almost unanimous, but not quite. Everywhere in the world, there are Mac and the boys. End quote. Now, if you haven't read this book, Mac and the boys are just a group of guys, and they're just plain good guys. They live with integrity, generosity, and authenticity. They're not successful in the eyes of their society, but they have an incredibly rich life and make a hugely positive impact on the people who know them, more so than any quote-unquote successful person in society. As butchers competing for wages and positions in a dying trade, we have to make that choice, whether to spend our energy breaking each other down to secure our status, or building each other up in a spirit of generosity. Travis, David, Adam Danforth, Rod Slater, and other vocal butchers have chosen to share their knowledge and are laying the groundwork for what a global butcher community could look like. But it takes a village.
One of the main reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, besides just brag about all the shit I know, is when I was learning, people took time to teach me and to correct me. I generally work by myself, but every once in a while I luck out and get a good apprentice. To quote Mike Murphy, I like helping people figure things out. I don't covet any of the knowledge I know. I want to view my knowledge as more open source, and with this podcast, that's why I love doing Q&As. And if someone has a question and I know the answer and it's a simple, just like, half a paragraph or something like that, then I'm more than willing to give my opinion if they want it. I'll never give unsolicited advice because it comes off as criticism. That's a big thing or problem when you see things online, is people need to be more constructive with their feedback. When you see someone who's not doing very well, it's easy to say, quote unquote, that person should go back to meat school. But anyone could say that. Anyone could point out someone's flaws. And if you feel like you want to do that, to point out someone's flaws, short from putting your boning knife upright on the table with the tip sticking up and putting your the tip against your temple and then having someone kick you in the back of the head, how about you just give them some good advice or say, hey, maybe it would work better if you did this, or keep your fucking mouth shut. As you see, I'm not the type of person that bitches about a situation and doesn't offer a solution. I think that boning knife is a good idea. But let me get back on track. When I was being taught this trade by incredible master butchers, third generation, fourth generation, multiple people have influenced me. People who used to work in retail stores when they would receive carcasses and have seen the industry change into what it is now. They got excited when they would see young blood, such as myself back then, keep with it and stick around. And they were willing to give me all the information I wanted, as long as I paid it forward. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode of The Meat Block. We'll be back next week. Some episodes in whip right now we need your help on. If you know a good awful recipe, let us know. We would love to hear it. Also, we are working on our second Retail Horror Stories episode, so please send us those stories. And they all don't have to be about difficult customers. It could be about employees, just unique situations, just stuff that when it was happening, you just thought to yourself, I can't believe this is happening. Where if you were a fly on the wall in that situation, was your reaction appropriate? If not, it's probably worth telling us. For example, if you just got the case of the fuckets, gave everyone the middle finger, and walked out, that would be a good story. What led up to that moment? Please let us know. And you could let us know on Facebook. Just search The Meat Block, or you could email us at themeatblockpodcast, or tweet us at themeatblockpod, or Instagram at themeatblock. If you want to get a hold of me, I am at American Butcher on Instagram and Facebook, David, a Farm Butcher on Instagram, and Ryan at Gather and Break. We need to change his name to have Butcher in it because it fucks up my flow. And while you're on your computer or device or whatever, reaching out to us, please go to Apple's podcast app, search Meat, and we are the third result, or you could type in The Meat Block, and please leave us a 5-star review and a comment. If you want to be cool like Old Smoke 3, I think that's Old Smoky. I think that's some hip way of saying it. I also think I grew up with him. I think that's Ben Carter, because that was his nickname. And if it's not you, Ben, then you should be listening. Also, big thanks to Salt and Smoke 90. And they're a butcher shop, actually. So thank you for the support and the comment. And if you want to check them out, they're at Salt and Smoke on Instagram. Our intro music was Hank Williams Sr., Jambalaya, and Ring the Bell. Our outro music is Wayne the Train Hancock with the song Tropical Blues. It's humid and muggy where I am right now, so that's why I wanted to play this song. All right, until next week, keep your knives sharp and live in the margin.